In 1700, India was the richest economy on earth, contributing nearly 24% of global GDP, more than all of Europe combined. We were called Soni ki Chidiya, the golden bird. But by 1947, when the British finally left, India's share had collapsed to just 3%. Here's how it happened. Number 10, the drain of wealth. The British conquest of India wasn't just political, it was economic robbery on a scale the world had never seen. After the Battle of Buxar in 1764, the East India Company gained control of Bengal's revenues. From 1765, taxes collected in India were shipped directly to London. Dadabhai Naoroji's famous drain theory showed that hundreds of crores, nearly 200 to 300 million pounds annually, were siphoned away. But it wasn't just money. Priceless treasures were looted. The kohinoor diamond in 1849, temple gold, jewels, and manuscripts. Historian Utsa Patnaik estimates that between 1765 and 1938, Britain drained wealth equivalent to $45 trillion in today's value. This colossal theft bankrolled Britain's rise while leaving India impoverished and stripped of its cultural pride. Number 9, the fall of India's industry. In the 18th century, India was the world's manufacturing hub. Bengal's muslin was so fine it was called woven air. Indian silk, carpets, and steel were prized worldwide. Shipyards in Bombay and Calcutta built some of the finest vessels of the age. But under British rule, this industrial base was systematically destroyed. Heavy tariffs strangled Indian textiles while British cloth entered duty-free. By the 1830s, Manchester's mills had replaced Bengal's weavers, and millions were left starving. Indian shipbuilders were crippled by laws in the 1820s that barred their ships from international voyages. Even India's legendary wootz steel disappeared as mining was redirected to fuel Britain's industries. By 1900, India's share of world industrial output had collapsed to just 2%, down from 25% in 1750. Number 8, the collapse of innovation and craft. India was once home to master craftsmen and scientists. Jewelers, stone carvers, metalworkers, astronomers, and medical experts. But colonial policies crushed these traditions. Indigenous schools were shut down, especially after 1857, and English education replaced centuries of local knowledge. Thomas Macaulay's Minute on Education, 1835, openly declared that the aim was to produce a class of clerks, not innovators. By independence, India had just 7 engineering colleges and almost no modern industries. A civilization once known for Nalanda and Takshashila was reduced to a colony of clerks and coolies. Number 7, from granaries to famines. The permanent settlement of 1793 forced peasants to pay up to 50% of their produce as tax, regardless of the harvest. Farmers were pushed into growing cash crops like indigo, opium, and cotton instead of food grains. By the late 1800s, over 1/4 of cultivable land was locked into cash crops, leaving little for subsistence. The result was devastating. Food shortages became chronic, debt spiraled, and India's self-sufficient village economy collapsed. A land once known for overflowing granaries was reduced to recurring famines. Number 6, famines as policy. Between 1770 and 1943, India suffered over 30 major famines. The Great Bengal Famine of 1770 killed 10 million, nearly 1/3 of Bengal's population. Nearly 2 centuries later, the Bengal Famine of 1943 killed 3 million more. What made this worse was that famine was not an accident. It was policy. During the 1943 famine, grain was exported to Britain and hoarded for Allied soldiers, even as Indians starved. Winston Churchill callously remarked that the famine was Indians' own fault for breeding like rabbits. By 1947, India's life expectancy was just 32 years. The scars of these engineered famines shaped India's post-independence obsession with food security and self-reliance. Number 5, collapse of trade. In 1750, India controlled 25% of global trade. By 1900, that had collapsed to below 2%. India was turned into a raw material colony. Cotton, opium, jute, and indigo went out, while machine-made British goods flooded in. A vibrant trading nation was reduced to a dependent appendage of Britain's empire. Number 4. Education system destroyed. In 1800, India had hundreds of thousands of pathshalas and madrasas, locally funded in teaching arithmetic, science, and commerce. Literacy rates in some regions were as high as 60 to 70%. But the colonial state dismantled this system. Macaulay's reforms created an English-speaking elite, while the vast majority were excluded. By 1947, literacy had collapsed to just 12%. The deliberate destruction of education left India with one of the lowest human capital bases in the world. Number 3. Divide and rule. The British mastered the art of sowing division. From the 1871 census, they rigidly classified Indians by caste and religion. Electoral reforms in 1909 and 1919 gave separate electorates, entrenching divides further. These policies poisoned India's social fabric, fueling communal tensions that exploded during partition. Even today, many of these divisions in politics and society trace back to colonial engineering. Number 2. Military and administrative drain. After the 1857 revolt, India's budget was hijacked to pay for its own colonization. Over 50% of revenues went to fund the British Army and the salaries of colonial officials. For example, in 1913, India collected 82 crore rupees in revenue, of which 41 crore rupees went to the military alone. Health, education, and industry were left starved of funds. This kept India weak and underdeveloped, unable to invest in its own future. Number 1. Demographic decline. Perhaps the most tragic legacy was demographic. In 1750, India's population was around 200 million. By 1947, after nearly 2 centuries of famine, epidemics, and economic collapse, it had only reached 340 million, far below natural growth. Life expectancy had fallen to 32 years, compared to over 70 in Britain. Malnutrition was widespread, infant mortality was shockingly high, and literacy stood at just 12%. When independence came, India inherited not just poverty, but a population broken in body and spirit. Conclusion: in 1700, India was the golden bird. By 1947, it had been stripped to the bone. Colonialism wasn't modernization, it was systematic extraction, a transfer of wealth, skills, trade, and human potential that left India among the poorest nations on earth. And the shadow of that destruction still lingers today.